I think we did it. All right. Well, everybody, welcome. Or we'll see what happens here. So those that haven't met, this is my husband, Kelly. We've been together, married 27 years, but just celebrated our 30th year of being together. And tonight is a celebration of heritage and celebration of releasing book Twice Smart, and also the celebration of Justine Laurent, who is the main historical character in Twice Smart. Justine, was baptized July 9th, 1792.
So is that why you chose to be released on July 9th?
Could be.
So
there's your notes.
So what are you expecting to convey over tonight?
What's my agenda?
You wrote the book, you had something that you wanted to, I guess, get out. Why'd you write Twice Marked?
Well, Twice Marked has been an ongoing story for me for over 20 years, since I had met Justine in the records for the first time. You were actually with me that day when we found the documents, their court records. Justine fought for her children's rights in 1820 after the death of her man, Daniel Jazam. He had left the children money in his as an inheritance. And the White family, his older children, it looked like they were going to fight it. And she took them to court over that information. And it was almost like she had tell my story that first day when I met her or found the information.
Well, to me, that's one thing I've learned with the experience of, you doing genealogy for all this time. I've always heard people talk genealogy and they say this person's married to this person, had this kid, and it just sort of trails down the line of who married who and a bunch of names and everything. And it wasn't until you started telling me stories about, my history that I never knew, our history now, that it actually became anything meaningful. With just a bunch of names on a tree, like a flow chart, so it wasn't really. So yeah, whatever, the eye roll thing. Oh yeah, every time you go to, I'm gonna go to the library, I'm gonna go to the genealogy library. And I was just so like, why? How boring can you get?
Boring? It's not boring.
It's the stories that make it interesting. It's like, the old movies. They, you tell stories but instead of just being something made up in somebody's mind, it actually has a basis. And that's what makes it even more interesting.
And I think that is something that I've learned over the years, that I've had to tell the story to get people interested in their own history. It's on the other side. He let the tablet go dark, and now he's trying to figure it out. Getting into history, you have to tell the story of why is this important, knowing dates of, like when somebody died or, born or died, or, one of my favorites is knowing the dates of the Civil War. Who cares what is 1861 through 1865 matter? It doesn't. But whenever you put it in context that, particular family members were involved in the Civil War, and what happened to them during those moments, that's what makes the history interesting and meaningful to the individual. And that's one thing that I have learned over the years of that concept. So I guess that was part of me getting into storytelling and writing book and story.
One of the things that I can say, I think the best term to use and put it was, going back and hearing the stories of those people and knowing they're your family going through their troubled times and whatnot. When, we've had experiences and we've had friends that have experiences, hard times. And it's sort of, I guess, brings y'all together, associates you. You start thinking that they were real people. They went through some of the same things that we go through.
Mm-hmm.
So that in effect also makes it more realistic, makes it more meaningful.
Right.
So it's what.
Yeah, it brings context to your own life. That if they've gone through it and survived that particular event, then we can do the same. Or how did they survive that event? That could be a little clue on which direction to go, as well. There is some wisdom in their success that we can take and bring into our own life.
Let me ask you this. Through the years, you're throwing many names at me. Names sometimes, honestly, I can't even remember. You got so many names in the family and everything. But with all these names,
there's only 25,000 names in my family tree. I don't know what you're talking about.
But of all those names, I'm sure everyone has a story. You could have picked anybody out of the 25,000 names you got on the tree. Why'd you pick Justine in particular? What made you? What connection did you feel with her that you decided you wanted to do her story first?
She spoke to me. And that sounds so, just matter of fact or whatever, but it is matter of fact. People speak to you through the documents of their struggles that they go through, and it just sits on you. Like I said, it's been 20 years ago. The first time I heard tell my story, and every time that I find something new about her, I'm like, this would be awesome. This is a story that deserves to be told, and just fleshing that out. And I don't know if you remember that, she was my first NaNoWriMo write. I tried to write the story then, and that was what 2010, 2012, something like that. I went back and I have found, like, I wouldn't even call them books because of crap, but I found where I have tried to write her story 4 or 5 different times. And then I've realized with my first book, Mafi, Manette, she was the bridge. One of the things that I was having a hard time with is Justine's story is so important to me that I was afraid that to tell her story that I was going to screw it up. But it took Manette in my first book to show me that I could do it. I could write a viable story, and that I just needed to keep moving on. But these stories, it's almost like they're writing themselves. I'm just the vessel. Once I get my head out of the way, it goes fast. And it just comes. And dang, I've got 7 or 8 more lined out. that I'm fleshing out in different ways of how, what do I want to add, in from Mobile history and American history and all of that. What do I want to add into their life story to bring it more to life? And it's just been so fascinating to me, that the writing process. It's not just putting one word on a page and repeating that, putting one and then two and three. It's just start putting the story down and then get out of the way. Let it flow.
One of the things too in your book is talk a bit about herbalism, and that's one of the things that for you really seemed like you got into the genealogy and the right and everything. You went into herbalism. You continued that throughout the time that we've been married and everything. And I think that's pretty, old term school cool. I think that's pretty cool the way that you incorporated that into the story, because that is part of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Did that have anything to do with it? You feel like, did that draw you in too, or was that just an extra cool, nifty thing?
Yeah. Separate yourself from a story that you're writing about yourself. Not to say that, I am cameo to any particular character, but, we're drawing on our own history. We're drawing on our life experiences, and it just makes it easier. And over time, I've realized that, my historical fiction books are mirroring or echoing my nonfiction books. I do write books on my profession, holistic health and herbalism, and how that affects the people. We all live a life, and I just choose to make sure that holistic lifestyle is in their lives as well. Because historically it would be, because it's not some fanciful new age thing. It's something that is, I'm coming back to the roots, and this is what their life was. It was going out in the garden and growing tomatoes and basil right beside each other. It was going out into the woods and finding manglier, for an illness.
That's a herb I never heard of until you start doing your research. That was pretty interesting.
Well, it's just one of the common names for for the particular plant, and I learned from a Creole man that is the Creole name. So, hey, why not use it? But yeah, and then there's asafoetida. Yeah, that's been around for since the beginning. This was the medicine of the day. It's only been recent that we have, what they consider mainstream medicine. Alternative medicine is the medicine. It's the medicine of the people. So why not put it in these people's, lives? Because that's where it would have been. So it's just a natural process.
Talking about process. One of the things when, like I said, you were herbalist, primarily before you started into the books through NaNoWriMo, and which for y'all not familiar with that, it's National Write a Novel Month, which no longer exists. That did close down, but it was popular for several years, decades, or whatever, and it helps a lot of people start writing, which helps both of us stuff. So you were into the herbalism, and then you started getting into the genealogy through all that. One thing that surprised me is every time I talk with genealogists or hear genealogists talking, I always hear them referring to just like family tree, .com and all these different DNA tests and all of this. And I sort of just, I guess, generally, without thinking deep into it, just saw that as the way of getting information. But when you start doing this crazy thing of going to the courthouse, I'm like, what the world does the courthouse have to do with genealogy? And that's when I think you started really advancing, and you started explaining to me about property records and different legal documents from case suit, like with Justine, all the different legal cases that happen and all that. There's so much information in that. How did you go down that route? What made you realize that?
Well, I guess for one, I would need to clarify that genealogy isn't something that I just got into. I don't know if you remember us meeting AJ. I was pregnant with Jacob, our oldest, and that was 26 years ago. And I guess that would have been about the time that I started asking questions of, what your heritage is. I know it's a little late. We were already married and pregnant with with a child, but hey, you got to start somewhere. But back in the day, back in those days, a lot of it was going to the courthouse, and that was before DNA became popular. And I don't know if you remember that very first DNA test that you took, and I think it was 2020 or not 2020, 03, maybe 04. And this was before Family Finder. It was before, you can look at your mom's heritage and your dad's heritage all in one. This was, you had to pick a lane. And a female, a male could not search his mom's line at that time. You had to do female to female, male to male. And that was the first DNA test took. And it was quite a bit of money. It took me a long time to save up the money to do that. But that was to answer one question of who's Bartholomew Laurent, which he's one of the ones that I have the most information on and still know the least about. I have more information that says he's not in a particular location or did not do a particular thing than I do of what he did. So he is so confusing. I don't know where he came from. I don't know when he was born. We don't even have a death date, though I do have over the years, I've been able to narrow it down. But to get back to the question that you had asked, of what was the question again?
Basically, how did you start getting into court documents over the standard?
Okay, yeah.
Like DNA test.
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily that I started recently. Maybe recently it has become more available because, back in the day, there was a few times that we went to Mobile and I spent a lot of time, telling the clerk, all right, I want this document and want this document, and spent a lot more money than he actually knows on, large pieces of paper, and then brought it home and, deciphering it. And then it came to where some of the documents were online under Family Search, which Family Search is free. But, having slower speed internet, what takes me maybe 5 minutes to do today and gather, 10, 15 documents today would have taken days to do, and tediously, download. I'd have to know what document I'm actually looking for. But today, it's smooth sailing. More documents are online, and I can go through it in a relatively fast pace, and even scan document per document. The speed of the internet it makes it conducive. And then also indexing has gotten a lot better. That's one of those newfangled found pieces of information that I have found in the last year, and going back through the things that I've researched to death before in finding a ton of information just because there's a searchable index now. It's never ending. It's like, I'm always at an amusement park. I have so much fun, searching through 200-year-old records and dead people's documents.
Well, because there is, such a plethora of documents out there now, so much information, but you wrote your book as historical fiction. So you find that like you had to have a balance of what's, strictly from the documents or what's real. How much of the book did you embellish on your own? How much of it's like straight from the documents, just basically?
Well, I made it a mission that if I had a document saying information, I've kept that information, to the best of my ability, and a lot of documents are up to interpretation of the person as a whole, or even the life as a whole, or even the context of the history at that time. For instance, like some documents, will say that a person is Creole, but you have to know what time in history that document is and what Creole meant at that point in time. Further back in say the mid 1700s, before 1800, Creole meant that you were born in what we call America. The continent of America. That's all it means, that you were born here. You weren't born in Europe, so you're Creole. But around 1800 and after, Creole started meaning, what we consider Creole today, of a separate community. And depending on who you talk to, there could be the argument of, no, it doesn't mean black and white or mixed, but it mostly in the context that I'm using it for, especially with your family, it is Creole of color, or Creole de color is how they acknowledge themselves. But I do acknowledge that there are, what we consider white Creoles, like as if we could actually put people in little nice little slots and they stay there. That doesn't happen.
Government check boxes.
Yeah, those little government check boxes. You could technically check white, black, or other, and still be correct. But there would be some arguments there, depending on who wants to fuss about it. And that is a fascinating thing with culture and with how society is feeling today on what you can claim.
Well, talking about claiming stuff and fussing about it. I remember when you first started getting into all this, my whole life, I was told that I was Cajun, quote unquote coon ass. And, the whole family, my parents and grandparents, whatever, it's the term that they always use and everything. So when you came out and started saying I was Creole, I kept, fussing about arguing with you, like, you don't know what you're talking about, da da da. And the more stuff you got, the more like, okay, whatever. And eventually, I guess you converted me, and I realized, okay, yeah, I actually am Creole. But from what I've learned from you, in society, certain, I guess, groups or whatever are more accepted in some, sections or whatever. I'm not using proper words, but so it was like my family was trying to fit into a particular group to get the social benefits of it, I guess you could say.
Right.
And I guess that's why.
Yeah, and this comes from interpretation and trying to wrap my head around it as well, and articulate it to the best of my ability. So of course I could possibly get flack on saying this, but I've learned over the years that when addressing the white versus black and what section that you live in, that I just need to step back away from um, the feelings of it, and then just lay out my interpretation. So this, and I'm leading to, because this may sound harsh to some certain people, and I'm not meaning it to be harsh, but I've realized just being open and upfront is the best way to address it. But we're talking. All right, if we go back to the 1920s, 1930s, that's the beginning of Jim Crow, beginning of a separation in white water fountains and black water fountains, and all of that. And I think that is really the beginning, or that's not the beginning of the end of Creole community. Community is rising again today, because there are people that really care about where they've come from, and in learning all of this. But there was a time where Creole is a mix. So if you think about it, whenever you have two Creole family or people coming together in creating a new family of their own, you're going to have a mix between the darker side and the lighter side, and it flows from a person to person. And I've even noticed over the years, it flows from sunlight to darkness. Over the years, during the summer, you get darker. You get that nice tan, and in the wintertime, you get lighter. You get more white. But to go back to where you change from Creole to Cajun, we're talking Mobile in the 1930s, Jim Crow, so on and so forth, and the Black Flight. It was actually a movement where blacks from the South, they were spreading all over the place, and whether that was racial tensions or I've been given reasons of there just was no jobs, and jobs were found in other places. But I've also found, for the most part, and I know there's more places that people fled, but if your family was darker, you tended to go north, to the factories that were being built, and where all that labor needed to be up there. Chicago, Detroit. There was even a large flight to California, because it was more acceptable, to be black during those times and not be harassed in California.
Well, it was something that so surprised me when we went to the Mobile Creole Society reunions, and that people that were originally from Mobile were coming in. Like I said, they were originally from Mobile, moved away, and they were coming in from Detroit, and California, and everything. I didn't realize there was such a movement of it.
Oh yeah, we've even got people over in Australia, in that area. There has been a Creole family that come in from that side of the world to one of the reunions, and it's fascinating to see the children, learning their heritage. But to get back to the flight of Creole society in the 1920s and 30s. I simplify it and I say, if you were black, then you went north. If you could possibly pass as white, you tended to go to New Orleans because it was more acceptable. You could pass as white in New Orleans. Now, if if your family at the time went, say, like Utah, There might be some side eyes of, you white? No, I don't think so. But you were able to pass as your family was able to pass as white in New Orleans fairly easily because of the Creole population there, and that was part of putting your heritage aside and separating you from the that particular stigma. Was they went to New Orleans and gave up their heritage. They there was a conversation that I had with your great uncle Oliver before he passed, and that was when I was just first getting into it, and I had mentioned, well, you do know that you're Creole, right? Oh, he jumped my shit with that. No, I'm not. Don't say that, and don't ever talk about that again. And I was taken back for a little while, but it took me a few minutes for a little bit of time to sink in that he was a child when they left Mobile, and he would have been taught every chance of the way that you were white. You have gone white. This is who you are. This is who you're going to be, and this is who you're going to fight for. So I can see, of why your family held on to that. And it is just a fascinating part of history and culture. And with all of that, and I'm not necessarily saying any of that with any type of negativity or prejudice against any particular race, religion, creed, whatever. It's just more of, the more we talk about this and the more we allow the differences to come out and accept the differences, the faster that we will heal in society in general. I didn't grow up in the race war of, you don't, blacks and whites not talking to each other. I grew up where you respected your elders, and it didn't matter about race or societal standing or whatever. They were an elder, and you would treat them with respect. And I guess I'm saying that because that's the growth that I'm coming from, and I'm hoping that other people can, I don't know, accept that or expand to that and see that we are all people and that we all have struggles. We all have successes. We all need friends. We all are living on this rock together. And how are we going to make it a better place? And I think for, a little bit, that's what these books are about, is to call out and show the differences and the injustices, and for you to figure out what that means to you.
There's injustices too. One of the main things in the book about is, injustice to Justine. And I was looking at your cover, talking about Creoles and everything, and I noticed the house on there. We talked about this before, that Creoles had a different, building, houses were different than a lot of other areas in America.
Just to show you what he's talking about. He's referring to these two doors. I've had more comments about, these two doors and how I had the house or the cover made wrong, that it's got two doors.
People are trying to accuse you of using an AI generator that went wrong or whatever. Like, no, that's the actual way the house was built.
Mm-hmm. This particular picture is from a photograph that I have of, it was the actual house that is written about in the book. That's a little tidbit, but it was your great grandfather's house. It was their home, the Laurent home, before they, before they moved to New Orleans. This was the home that they lived in, and it's the house that was on the property that is fought over in the book. A little tidbit of information.
Tidbit in the power struggle. Justine, female, and then one of the leading males of the area too, right?
Yes. So Justine is a unmarried Creole of color, a woman, and this is in 1825 time frame, 1825 to 1830. So it took a couple of years to fight over this, but she's fighting, in essence, she's fighting her son-in-law, which I know technically, technically it's not her son-in-law because they were never legally married, but her man, they were together for 10 years, had 5 children, and he plainly leaves it in the will that the children are to receive an inheritance, and the white aristocrat son-in-law fought her. And for a Black woman, or technically a Creole woman, because a Black woman at that time period would not have been able to take a white man to court at that time. But being that she was Creole of color, from the Adam-Onis Treaty, they were given rights. See, you have to know your history too. They were given rights as a citizen, so the Creole community could take a white man to court, and she did. And she fought him, and it went all the way up to Alabama Supreme Court. And you'll have to read the book to find out what happens. There, I'll leave a little cliffhanger.
Well, reading the book and writing the book, it's 2 different perspectives and everything. And that was one thing I noticed when I'm sitting next to you and you're writing the story down or typing it in and everything. And all of a sudden I'm speaking all these like emotional, I'm like freaking out because you just out of the blue, like wigging out. So what is there any like particular scene that you felt that really like impacted you? Like you just like that's your favorite scene or?
Oh my, there's so many that have actually made me cry as I'm writing them and reading it afterwards, or made me angry of, this motherfucker, type of thing. Made me happy that things went the way they did. But, the interesting thing is, I've been in the records for, we've already established so many years, I know Justine like the back of my hand. But as I'm writing her story and diving into what it could be like day for day and, creating a life for her, it gave me different perspectives I've never even thought about. Beyond the records, because I don't even know if I finished addressing this, but, my stories, I pay attention to the records first. That is first and foremost. If it says something in the record, I am going to stick to that because that's the way it was, or now that's the way it was, records can be technically be falsified, but, we're going to move beyond that. And then after I pay attention to the records, what was going on in history? I have records of Justine and Daniel, and they started their relationship in about 1813, which at that time in Mobile, the War of 1812 was really starting to come in strong, and there was the Red Stick Wars, right about that time too. So there is the Americans coming in from the north, and putting stress on the Indian or the Native Americans living, on the outskirts and the outside of Mobile. And then there's Mobile itself that's been established as its own little community. Like you could really say it's a community in the woods, or a community on the coast. So all of this clashing, and how does that affect the daily life, and affect change, in their life. You kind of think life is stagnant, when you're thinking on the surface of life. But as we've lived, there has been, many changes in life, and many things that have affected us, whether it's weather, floods, hurricanes, or moving, going from one location to another, just moving house to house, or losing our house, due to a flood, and how that affected us.
Yeah, that's definitely a story for another time.
But all of that gave me history for myself to think of, and how do I implement that in Justine's life, because she would have dealt with floods, living on the river. She would have dealt with hurricanes living on the coast. How did a frost affect their newly planted garden that they needed for food for a year? It's not like you could just go to the supermarket back then. They had to grow their own food. How did it affect their animals that affected their living and livelihood? All of these. How did the Americans come in to the community? How did that affect her shopping? Those are things that you don't think about on the surface of it, but it's very important, because it would have been a major transition, in life. And how did she adjust to it and overcome whatever the diversity was?
You mentioned a lot of things, that were like unique to the Creoles, lifestyle things that they did and everything and all that. And I think people coming fresh to the book, might not have a basis to start the book with. I guess you could say, what I'm saying. So my question is, this is your second book. You wrote My Fee first.
Mm-hmm.
Do they need to read that one first, or is it better for them to read that one first, or how do you?
I keep getting asked that question, and at first I was sitting on that. Yes, this is a series, but they are standalone. But if you are new to Creole history or the Creole community, you might want to read Mafi first, because it explains more of what Creole is and what Creole society is. But if you're if you pick up Twice Mark first, you're not going to be lost, but reading Mafi first, or reading it, in difference, is, it is kind of a chronological, because these are dual timelines, so I do have historical characters in these, but I also have characters of the present day, whatever the present day means. But I do follow their life, but you can pick up one book and not be lost if you didn't read the book before. But there is a tie to both of them, and eventually, they plan on, there's going to be 4 books in this series, and there is an overall arc to all 4 books. And to understand that overall arc, you will have to read all 4 books. but it's not going to kill if you jump into one and only read one or two. And how to articulate that's something that I am learning. You don't just go into writing a book and call yourself an author and know everything about the industry of authorship or book writing. So there are things that I am continually learning in the book industry, and I haven't quite grasped how to articulate all that aspect. So it is something that I'm still trying to figure it out.
So to get more books in the works.
Yes.
Which we were talking earlier about the whole riding that line of, like, I guess we say, offending people getting sensitive to the issues and everything. And your next book, from what a little bit you were talking about it, got mine, is going to be more delving into that line.
Yeah, that racial tension of today is going to be in the next book. And
interesting.
Yeah, and it is interesting how I'm getting more and more bold, in my thought process of, okay, well, I'm going to bring this out and see how it goes and see the pushback. And book 2, I'm kind of like, I know there'll be pushback, but it needs to be said. Book 3, it's like, how do I even say that on camera? F the pushback. Come on. Yeah, and it's not necessarily, to be hard on one particular group of people versus another. It's just what I see, and this needs to be healed. I'm not coming at it with a ulterior motive or some sort of mean spirit out of it. It is out of healing, and to heal a wound, like a festering wound, like you have an infection, like say on your hand or whatever, the best way to start healing that is to cut it open. So there we go. Book 3 is cutting open that wound.
Well, that ain't mentioning me.
Well, that's the herbalist coming out at me.
Getting close to the end, so I know you got some book signings and whatnot coming up, so you might want to tell everybody what when these dates are and everything. And then from there, I guess if you got any last words to wrap everything up with.
Well, if you are interested in getting Twice Marked, my newest book and the celebration of tonight, well, actually, any of my books, if you're interested in getting any of my books, you can find it on my website, beccasplanet.com. You can find it on Amazon. For those that like reading on a tablet, I am Amazon exclusive, so you can get it for free on Unlimited. Yeah, Kindle Unlimited. You can also find my books local here in Brazoria County, Texas, at the Horde at the Brazos Mall. You can also find it at the Scholar Source in Lake Jackson on Plantation. Those that are local to Mobile, my books are at the Haunted Bookshop on
Google.
Yeah, Joaquin Street. I think it's number 9 Joaquin, but downtown, close to Dauphin Street. And then if you want to see me personally, I have a book signing for my other new book coming out next week. I have it at Scholar Source. I have Roots and Remedies coming out next week. And then on August 8th, I will be in Mississippi at the Mississippi Gulf Coast Book Fair, Book Festival in Gulfport. September 5th and 6th, I will be at the Angleton Artisan Market in Angleton at the fairgrounds. In October 17th, I will be at the Tex Indie Author Book Fair in Houston. And you can find all of this information on my website, beccasplanet.com.
Final about books. That's all.
Oh, grab the book. Let me know what you think about it. Leave comments on the comment section. Let's continue this conversation there. I will see y'all again soon. Peace. I didn't even turn it off. I don't see an off. Yeah, I don't see an off button.
Maybe.
Oh, in stream right there. Woohoo!
Bye again.
Bye.